Imagine a place where time seems to slow down, where the vastness of nature imposes itself at every step and every turn, reveals mysteries that defy logic. Today, I invite you to embark on a journey through Alaska, a land of extremes, where enigmatic disappearances, superhuman landscapes, and daily challenges blend into a story as fascinating as it is terrifying. Here, amid imposing mountains, millenary glaciers, and a silence that speaks louder than any words, we will unravel the secrets of this territory that is both an inhospitable paradise and a testing ground for human resilience. Prepare to be surprised. And who knows, even question what it really means to live in a place where every day is a new adventure. Although it's often dubbed the little cousin of the Bermuda Triangle, Alaska's own triangle should be recognized as the elder, more imposing relative. This vast region, linking Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik, harbors a unique mystery. Since the 1970s, over 20,000 people have vanished there. That's an astonishing average of roughly 2,250 disappearances per year, more than 6 each day, eclipsing even the notorious Bermuda Triangle. But what could be behind such a staggering statistic? Are mysterious magnetic forces at work, extraterrestrial interventions unfolding, shadowy political schemes in play? Or is it simply the sheer combination of vast, untamed wilderness, unpredictable weather, and rugged terrain that defines Alaska? Today, we're diving into the factors that make many people steer clear of this enormous territory, and exploring how, despite its harshness and unforgiving nature, Alaska has become so infamous. Its very name comes from the Aleut word, Alyeska, meaning the Great Land, which fits perfectly. Spanning roughly 665,000 square miles, Alaska is the largest U.S. state, about 1/5 the size of the remaining 49 states combined. To put that in perspective, if you were to overlay Alaska on the map of the contiguous states, it would stretch from southern Georgia all the way to California. Moreover, out of nearly 12,300 miles of U.S. coastline, more than half, around 6,600 miles, belong to Alaska. Amazingly, Alaska remains as unexplored by humans as the vast oceans. Of its over 365 million acres, only about 160,000 have been truly settled, less than 1/20th of 1%. This makes it virtually an untouched frontier, the last great wild expanse in the United States. Even if someone could explore 1 million acres every day, it would take an entire year just to cover every inch of this massive wilderness. So, what does this nearly uninhabited land actually hold? First and foremost, mountains. Alaska is incredibly rugged, home to 17 of the 20 highest mountains in the United States, including North America's tallest peak, Denali, which towers over 20,200 feet. These mountains are grouped into 3 major ranges: the Brooks Range, the Alaska Range, and the Aleutian Range, which stretches deep into the Pacific. Nestled among and below these ranges are dense forests, towering glaciers, and tundras, regions where extreme cold and short-growing seasons keep trees at bay. Add to that a seemingly endless array of lakes and rivers. The state holds 40% of the nation's freshwater resources, covering 86,000 square miles, enough to fit the city of Los Angeles 183 times, or even the state of Minnesota. Out of roughly 3 million natural lakes, about 3,200 bear official names, and the 12,000 rivers add up to 365,000 miles of waterways, though less than 1%, around 3,100 miles, are designated as wild and scenic. And let's not forget the glaciers. 5% of Alaska, roughly 29,000 square miles, is dominated by about 100,000 glaciers, more than half of the world's total, keeping pace with its vast natural wonders. Alaska's state park system is the largest in the United States, encompassing 3.2 million acres. Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve, at 13.2 million acres, is the biggest national park in the country, big enough to hold Yellowstone National Park 6 times over. Unsurprisingly, the largest state park in the U.S., Wood-Tikchik State Park, is also Alaskan, spanning 1.6 million acres, more than 8 times the size of New York City, in a place defined by both liquid and frozen water, expansive tundras, and towering mountains. Alaska's extreme climate and environment almost take on a life of their own. In North America, it ranks among the areas most prone to extreme weather. Winter temperatures can plummet to 60-degree Arctics, 26-degree Arctics, creating nearly insurmountable barriers for human habitation. You might think, sure, it's just winter. It warms up eventually, right? But Alaska's cold plays by its own rules. Around 85% of the state is covered by permafrost, ground that remains frozen year-round. Even though the top layer might freeze and thaw with the changing seasons, the underlying effects persist, spawning a host of challenges we'll explore later. With such conditions, it's no wonder the human population is sparse. But the wildlife, that thrives. Most of America's salmon, crab, halibut, and herring come straight from Alaskan waters, while brown bears in the lower 48 have been threatened. Since 1975, Alaska is home to over 32,000 of these majestic animals, about 1 bear for every 21 people, contrasting sharply with the situation in the rest of the U.S., where fewer than 2,000 bears remain. What truly defines Alaska, however, isn't just its vast size or diverse wildlife, it's its profound sense of isolation. Despite its natural wonders and colossal expanse, the state feels almost untouched, with very few people spread across its rugged landscapes. With a population of around 730,000, nearly 500,000 fewer than even Rhode Island, the most populous U.S. state, the population density is roughly 1 person per square mile, compared to an average of 98 per square mile elsewhere. Even Wyoming, famous for its remoteness, has 6 times the density of Alaska. This makes it one of the most solitary places to live. To make matters worse, over 80% of Alaskans reside in just 3 urban centers: Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau, with only 3 settlements exceeding 10,000 inhabitants. And if that weren't enough, the state's remoteness intensifies the feeling of isolation. Many towns and villages can only be reached by plane or boat, as is the case with Juneau, the only U.S. capital inaccessible by road. There are a mere 17,000 miles of roads connecting a territory that spans a continent. In contrast, states like Texas and California boast hundreds of thousands of miles of highways, meaning that despite its vast size, Alaska remains one of the most inaccessible places on Earth. This isn't due to neglect, but rather the extreme natural challenges. The permafrost covering 80% of the state makes road construction and maintenance a constant battle against nature. As the locals say, in Alaska there are only 3 seasons: winter, thaw, and road building. Speaking of transportation, here's another surprise. Even in the height of summer, when conditions improve, most travel and freight are carried out by plane, float plane, or boat. Anchorage, for instance, hosts the world's busiest float plane base, with over 600 takeoffs and landings on peak days. This not only draws tourists eager to seize the brief, welcoming summer window, but also highlights how isolation shapes life in Alaska. An interesting tidbit that few know: the flight from Juneau to Seattle takes only about 2 hours and 20 minutes, yet reaching San Francisco can take over 6 hours. For comparison, a flight from London to Istanbul lasts roughly 3 hours and 50 minutes, underscoring how Alaska, despite its proximity to key hubs, maintains its aura of seclusion. Human history in Alaska runs as deep as its harsh landscapes. The territory was among the first in the Americas to be settled, with human presence dating back tens of thousands of years. Archaeological research suggests that the first migrants, coming from Eurasia, possibly crossing an ancient ice bridge, or navigating in rudimentary boats, did more than just settle. They thrived. Artifacts, such as ancient fishing weirs recently discovered along the coast, hint at permanent settlements that could date back over 10,000 years. Yet, much of the evidence of these early inhabitants has been lost over time, as rising sea levels, driven was by the melting glaciers at the end of the last ice age, submerged ancient coastal communities. Recent studies suggest that instead of an exclusive inland migration, these pioneers might have followed the Pacific coastline, using kelp forests as underwater highways to locate food and shelter. This fresh perspective on migration routes not only deepens our understanding of history, but also adds layers to how humans adapted to extreme environments. Still, the question remains, why do so few choose to live in Alaska today? And why, thousands of years ago, did so many brave its inhospitable terrain? Perhaps, as we'll see, the very difficulty of adapting to Alaska's harsh conditions serves as a kind of trial, a test of discipline, determination, and survival skills. After all, living here demands more than just courage. It requires being ready to face challenges ranging from natural hazards to logistical nightmares that can literally be a matter of life and death. Returning to the origins of its first inhabitants, for a long time, archaeologists believed that the crossing into North America occurred about 13,000 years ago via the Bering Land Bridge, a strip of ice connecting Russia to Alaska during the last glacial period. Archaeological evidence suggests these migrants didn't just stop in Alaska. They pushed inland and even reached as far as the equator, leaving behind a legacy of unyielding determination in the face of a relentless environment. Curiously, recent findings point to alternative routes where the first Americans might have skirted along the Pacific coast, exploring areas rich in biodiversity and natural resources, a true natural highway, offering both shelter and sustenance. Alaska's extreme weather, from surprisingly warm summers with temperatures reaching 90 to 33 to brutal winters dipping as low as 60 to 51 affects not just human life, but also the storage and preservation of food. In Alaska, food can be stored almost indefinitely, thanks to the natural refrigeration provided by its low temperatures. Historically, native populations relied on the abundant local resources, fishing for salmon, hunting seals, moose, and other animals, and supplemented their diets with the diverse local flora. Today, the state accounts for 60% of the nation's commercial fisheries, including salmon, crab, and cod. Moreover, the long summer days, with up to 20 hours of daylight in some areas, foster an explosive growth of vegetables, sometimes producing record-breaking yields like 138-pound cabbages, 65-pound melons, and 35-pound heads of broccoli. Yet it isn't all abundance. The extreme temperature swings and the challenges posed by permafrost create ongoing issues for infrastructure. The scarcity of roads is a direct result of the monumental challenges faced by construction in such an environment. The frozen ground shifts, sinks, and cracks with seasonal changes, demanding ingenious and sometimes costly solutions. A prime example is the renowned Alaska Highway, built in 1942 by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This engineering marvel, which required the labor of 11,000 soldiers, 16,000 civilians, and 7,000 pieces of equipment, cost an astonishing $185 million at the time, the equivalent of over $3.5 billion today. And even then, it barely slices through the state's vastness. Now 80 years old, this highway is already showing signs of wear, underscoring the constant tug-of-war between human engineering and nature's unyielding force. The challenges don't stop there. Alaska faces intense natural risks, avalanches, landslides, floods, and even glacial lake outburst floods, sudden glacier failures that unleash devastating torrents. For instance, on August 6, 2024, the Mendenhall River near Juneau rose 16 feet, 8 meters above normal, triggered by a rupture in a glacial lake in the Mendenhall Glacier's Suicide Basin. Recent data indicate that since 2011, such events have become more frequent, likely worsened by climate change. which destabilizes glaciers. Beyond the weather, Alaska sits atop three major fault systems, making it one of the most seismically active regions in the world. Between 2013 and 2018, approximately 150,000 earthquakes were recorded, 31 of them registering a magnitude of 6 or higher. On March 27, 1964, a 9.2 magnitude quake shook the Prince William Sound region, the second largest ever recorded, triggering thousands of aftershocks, landslides, and devastating tsunamis that even reached cities in Oregon and California. In coastal communities like Whittier, Valdez, Seward, and Chenega, waves as high as 170 feet, 51 meters, flooded areas within minutes, resulting in tragic loss of life and massive destruction. What truly sets Alaska apart, however, is its paradox. A land where natural challenges are as extreme as the rewards. On one hand, there's an abundance of natural resources, from fish to vast, untamed forests and pristine wilderness. On the other, the steep cost of living in an environment that constantly tests human endurance. Every Alaskan knows that in this realm, being prepared is non-negotiable, external help is scarce, and the daily reality is a struggle against the elements. And speaking of challenges, consider the notoriously high cost of living in Alaska, driven by the difficulty of importing goods and the sparse population. Despite economic booms fueled by oil discoveries, thriving fisheries, and other resource-related opportunities, migration to the state has remained relatively stagnant over recent decades. In many ways, Alaska's isolation is not only physical, but cultural as well. Since first contact with Europeans back in the 18th century, epidemics and conflicts drastically reduced the native population, a decline that only began a slow recovery after World War II. In 1867, Alaska was sold by Russia to the United States for $7.2 million, a deal driven both by American strategic interests and Russian fears of losing the territory to the Japanese. Since then, Alaska has been a linchpin in U.S. defense, housing military bases and playing a crucial role in the country's nuclear missile defense system. In 1935, General Billy Mitchell testified before Congress, declaring Alaska the most strategic place on the planet. This privileged geographic position, so near the center of the Northern Hemisphere, is one reason why settlement in the state was never actively promoted except in purely economic contexts. At the turn of the century, following the first official U.S. census in 1880, which recorded a mere 33,400 inhabitants, Alaska's populations doubled during the Klondike Gold Rush of 1896-1897. Back then, around 100,000 people rushed in search of fortune, yet only 30,000 actually made it to the Klondike region. A harsh reminder that the pursuit of gold often meant confronting nature's brutal realities without proper preparation. Among these adventurers was a young Jack London, who arrived in Alaska at 21 full of hope and soon faced bitter disillusionment. After days of grueling travel, London encountered the harshness of the frozen desert, including a chilling moment when he pulled a pair of boots from the snow, only to find they were entangled with the remains of a man buried by an avalanche along the infamous Chilkoot Trail. That incident, along with the catastrophic Palm Sunday avalanche on April 3, 1898, which claimed 65 lives, would later shape the stories he'd famously tell. By the end of his journey, London returned to San Francisco with just a $450 in gold. But he carried with him an invaluable treasure of experiences that transformed him into the great writer he became. It is this ability to turn adversity into art and resilience that, even today, defines the very spirit of Alaska. In the end, Alaska demands a steep price from those who call it home, even temporarily. The search for gold or fortune can wait. Here, survival preparation is a daily lesson. From the constant threat of avalanches, with 170 deaths recorded between 1951 and 2023, to landslides, flood risks from thawing ice, and the dangers of glacial lake outburst floods, not to mention the ever-present threat of earthquakes that can trigger devastating tsunamis. This cocktail of factors makes Alaska a true testing ground for human endurance. Throughout this journey, we've seen how Alaska is both an inhospitable paradise and a land of opportunity for the fearless. Its relentless nature, infrastructural challenges, and constant natural threats are balanced by an abundance of resources and a nearly primal beauty. If there's one lesson to be learned, it's that what makes Alaska so enigmatic is precisely this duality, a place where every day is a new adventure, and the struggle for survival continues to inspire stories, always paving the way for new journeys and discoveries. And so we come to the end of this immersion into the unique universe of Alaska, a place where beauty and danger intertwine in unusual ways, challenging the limits of human imagination and courage. We hope this journey has aroused your curiosity and inspired you to explore even more of the secrets this wild giant holds. If you liked it, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to follow more incredible stories. Thanks for watching, and see you on your next adventure.